The following production is part of the Play Some Video Games podcast network.
Greetings, boarders, and welcome to Board with Video Games, the gaming podcast that strives for the right balance of coverage for games you play on your table and on your television. You can think of us as the New England Patriots and videotaping opposing teams of gaming podcasts. We're a proud member of the BWVG podcast network and thrilled to be part of the Dice Tower network as well. I am one of your hosts, Kyle, and joining me on this co-op adventure, the guy who only videotapes for documentaries. Josh, how are you doing this evening?
I thought about not answering you and walking out of the room.
I saw the smirk when I said it. I saw the smirk.
I'm sure you're also going to hold the Ravens accountable, because, they also did it, but actually recorded for not a documentary. So I'm sure they'll be held accountable too, right?
Right. Well,
I'm sure they'll be penalized too,
before.
right?
Just like the Patriots did before. It's fine. They just learned from them. They learned they watched how the Patriots won. And they said, this is what we need to do to win, too.
It wasn't there the first time the Patriots got caught, a team that was caught a week later and nothing happened, too? I wonder. It's okay, Kyle, because you don't have to worry about the Patriots anymore.
It's true. And my team won, amazingly, somehow.
Well, I think we know how they won.
They scored more points?
Well, yeah, but they used a Belichick trick against him, and they just ran the ball down our throats the whole game.
Oh, no, I was talking about the Vikings.
Oh, the Vikings.
Yeah, the Vikings won, somehow, against the Saints again.
Yes,
so,
yes. That was crazy.
But, hey,
Sorry.
It's okay. No, it's okay, because, football season's almost over, which means we're getting closer and closer to summer. It's okay to start looking forward to summer already, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I still have 3 more months of winter, but yeah, let's look forward to. I'll take spring.
Well, the holidays are over, so let's just go to the next exciting thing, and that is spring. So I think we should definitely be looking forward to that. Yeah, so that's pretty exciting. How was your last week, sir? Anything exciting happen?
No, not really. It's just been a very stressful month of December, and I'm looking forward to not having plans for the next 4 weekends that I know of.
That sounds amazing. I wish I had that, but I don't. But that sounds great.
Yeah. So,
all right, well,
we'll see.
We're just going to go ahead. We're going to get into the show. We're back to the typical shows now. So we're, going to do a little housekeeping. So thanks so much for joining us this week, everyone. As always, if you have any feedback, questions, or suggested topics, hit us up at Board with VG on Twitter, or check out all the awesome stuff over on the Instagram, also Board with VG. We are a proud part of Play Some Video Games, and PSVG is on Patreon. We're absolutely thrilled with the support you have given us there thus far. And if you'd like to monetarily support what we do, you can find us there at patreon.com/PSVG. But the most important thing is just that you listen and maybe share what we do with someone else who you think might enjoy it. We're also a member of the Dice Tower podcast network, so if you enjoy our conversations about board games and would like to dive deeper into that world, we encourage you to check out the Dice Tower podcast, as well as all of the other members of the network. No matter what type of board games you enjoy, there's a podcast on the network that is right for you. Enough of the housekeeping, back to regular shows. Josh, we can finally talk about all the things we've played over the last month or so. So Josh, what have you been playing on your tabletop, sir?
Well, Kyle, you would think that I would have some games to talk about.
It's been December's a busy month for a lot of things, so.
Yeah. It's kind of been a bummer. I've been really fighting to get board games to the table, and I've had a non-enthusiastic spouse about it. So, unfortunately, my pushing and prodding has gotten me nowhere. So, I'm curious if our listeners have experienced that as well. We did play one game a couple weeks ago. It was called Trellis. I don't remember if I talked about it just to you or if I talked about it on the podcast. But I did pressure her into playing games one night, and I said, you can pick the games, so she walked in the room and picked the shortest game we have, which is Trellis. Not that it's a bad game. I believe it's on the other end of the room now. I think it's by Breaking Games. Yes, it's by Breaking Games. And essentially Trellis is a 2-player board game. No, 4-player board game. 2 to 4 players, maybe 1 to 4, who knows. It's tile laying and planting, essentially. You're growing vines, and you're flowering your vines as you play. Now, the rules are pretty simple. On your turn, you play a tile, and you grow a vine. However, if you already have flowers on the vine that is continuing to grow, think of it like Suro a little bit, you will then bud more flowers on your vine. And the goal of the game is the person to get rid of all of their flower, we'll call them meeples, first wins the game. Simple as that. Just the first person to get rid of all their flowers. However, when you do place a tile and if it connects a vine that another player is currently on, they flower as well. But you're also rewarded for having your opponent flower by getting an extra action, which means you can place another one of your flowers on an unoccupied vine. So essentially, it's a very quick, you play a tile, you play a flower, you pick up a tile, so you always have 3 in your hand, and you just play until the first person's out of flowers to bud. I liked it. It was very quick. It plays under 20 minutes. I think at any player count. It's fast moving. There's not a lot of analysis paralysis or people taking long turns because you have only 3 tiles to choose from. You can't go necessarily in any direction you want. You have to follow the curve or the hook or the straight line of the vine that you're trying to grow. And you're not necessarily trying to keep your opponent from flowering because you also get a bonus for doing that as well. So, quick, little easy game. We picked it up at Target a few months ago on clearance. I think we paid like $9 for it, but I think it's normally $20. Pretty good game. Like I said, if it sounds up your alley, it's definitely worth the price if you can get it in that price point. Played more Gloomhaven. I think we may have talked about it briefly when we were doing board game of the decade awards with William. Mm-hmm. And I thought I could talk quickly about The Climbers, which is a game we played at PAX Unplugged. You see like the Barnes & Noble exclusive like family edition of this if you're in the store commonly. It is a colorful box, so it catches your attention. But essentially, Climbers is a game that... It's a dexterity game. Did I talk about this?
I think you may have mentioned it, but I don't think you talked in depth about it.
Okay, so when you play Climbers, the rules are... It comes with like a whole bunch of blocks on the inside of the board, the game. I'm not sure if there's plastic and wooden variants, but the one I played was wooden. And the rules tell you, it doesn't matter the amount of players, everyone collectively takes all these blocks and they build them to cover, I believe it's 2 pylons, and they can't be visible. And you can build it around it as however you want. And then what you do when you play the game is each block has a color representing players in the game. So if I'm red, I can only climb on red blocks. And it has to be, so I'm standing on the red square itself. So there's actual squares, there's rectangles, there's cubes, there's very tall ones, short ones, and small ones. When you start the game with 2 short ladders and 1 long ladder. And once they're one-time use. So a short ladder gets you up 1 level higher than you would be able to move normally. And the way you move normally is if your head is above that tile, you can just move up it. But if it's at your head level, you need to either use a small ladder or a large ladder to get up that piece. And then if you have a large ladder, you can also use it to go up to any higher as long as you can reach the top of the block with the ladder. and then the letter's gone. No one else gets to use it. It just goes away after you use it. But what you also do after your turn is you move or you move a block. And you can do that. You do both of those actions on your turn, but you can do them in any order. and that's simply picking up any block, no matter where, as long as a player isn't on it, and putting it anywhere, as long as it's not below the level where you picked it up from. So you always have to either be staying the same height or going higher. And it gets real tricky once people all start getting to the top of this so-called mountain that you're building. It's pretty fun. We had a lot of fun with the group of people we played with. It was, lots of laughs, and we were looking around at the other tables to see who had, and someone came over and started counting the height of our tower while we were playing. And he goes, "Okay, good, you're not taller than us." And then he goes back to his table. So it's pretty fun. Definitely a fun family game, and I would recommend it. That's The Climbers.
Awesome. All right, so Josh, I finally have gotten a couple heftier games to the table that I have referenced before, and I've talked about in passing, but I'm going to go a little in depth with both of these now, so kind of bear with me.
Cool.
First off, I'm going to talk about Seventh Continent, which is designed by Ludovic Roudy and Bruno Sauter, published by Serious Pulp. This game obviously came out a couple years ago. I think 2017 was the first Kickstarter that got released. I got it as part of a Kickstarter last year. And before I talk about the game itself, I want to talk about something they did with this Kickstarter, Josh, which is kind of mind-boggling, okay? So, Seventh Continent is a game where all about cards, and it's kind of a choose-your-own adventure, but the deck, because have you played Seventh Continent?
No, but I'm kind of familiar with the concept a little bit.
Okay, so you start with a card in the middle of the table, and then from that card, you're able to kind of build out the map as you go. Well, there's multiple different starting curses, because you're trying to basically cure a curse is what you're trying to do in every game. And there's multiple different starting curses. I think there's 7 or something like that in the base box. Which means that because of all these different cards that you're doing, and all these different boards that you're building, there's over 1,000 cards in this box, okay? Well over 1,000. Apparently, when they did their print run, and I had never paid attention to this. I got this other box, but never really paid attention to it. But apparently, when they did the print run, some of the cards were cut not quite the same size.
Yeah.
And the color on the back of a couple of them were slightly different. So they sent an entire replacement set of cards at no cost.
Nice.
So I basically kind of almost have 2 copies of the game. Not quite. Yeah. I don't think you could quite get there. But that to me was just number one mind-boggling, because I read about it and I looked at it, because when I first got the cards, I was like, what the heck? Why? I thought, because I got them at the same time I got the expansion. So I thought that it was like, oh, here are all the cards you have to replace because the expansion changes some of these things. Yeah. So I literally thought that was what they were for. And I was like, well, I want to play the game without the expansion first. So I just set them aside and was like, I will worry about this later. But then when I went to go sit down and really play the game, I brought that back out and started looking at it. And it literally is an entire just new set of cards that are quote unquote cut properly and quote unquote have like all of matching colors now. Oh, and I went in and tried to tell the difference of the colors. You can very slightly on a couple of the colors tell the difference on the backs, which does matter. But card size, I couldn't tell a difference on anything. There was nothing I could tell a difference on. So I'm just really impressed that they sent out an entire another set of cards.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of mind-blowing considering, this was like $100+ Kickstarter.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And they figure they're sending 1,000 cards to blew my mind. But anyway, neither
that's
here
good
nor there.
customer service.
Yeah, amazing customer service by them. They did great work by them to do that. So I really applaud them for that, number one. Number two, so the game itself. In Seventh Continent, like I said, you are a band of explorers. It is a cooperative game, and you are trying to solve or fix or cure a curse that occurs at the start of the game. The curse card tells you which card you're pulling from the 1,000+ cards to start as your center card. And then you put all of your players, put their little meeple/miniature on there. And then you just start going. That's it. There's no further direction than that. There's no further, here's what you need to do to solve or cure this curse. None of that is given to you. You literally get a general, flavor text idea of that this curse happened, and here's kind of what the area looks like. But the flavor text is super important because what it says really kind of does encourage you as to maybe what you should do or where you should go. And you get one clue when you start. For the first curse that they encourage you to do, the clue is a really kind of rough map that until you start playing, you have no idea what any of it means. But then on the card that your players are starting on, there are basically different actions listed. There's up to 30, right around 30 actions in the game. And some of them are what you'd expect them to be, like explore and move and things like that. But there are other things like crafting, making fire, resting, listening, playing music. Okay. There's all of these different actions that exist, but you can only take the actions that are listed on the card that you're on. So every card that you turn over or gets added to the map is going to give you different things to do, and you have to be on those cards to do there, so you have to take the move action. But what's interesting about this game, and what I think they do really, and other games have done this, but I think this works really, really well, is that you basically have a deck that gives you cards with abilities, and that is your life, but it's everyone's life. So everyone in the game is operating from this same deck. And every time you want to do an action, there's a cost associated with it, which is in blue, and it will be like X plus or 1 plus or 2 plus, and that's the number of cards you need to draw. And then there is a star symbol next to that, and that is how many stars you need to successfully get in those number of cards in order to successfully do the action. So obviously, the more cards you draw, the higher chance of success, but you're also taking more cards out of your quote-unquote life deck. And if that deck ever runs out, you don't lose immediately, but it really quickens the pace at which you're going to lose the game then, because there's some other mechanisms that come into play then. But it's a really inventive way to do it that no matter what action you want to take, you just draw some cards. Maybe 0 cards, maybe 1 card, maybe 5 cards. But that is what you're doing. And then what you do is once you've drawn the cards out, on the left-hand side of the card, there are stars printed. Sometimes it's a full star, sometimes it's a half star. But then you can kind of place cards together to make 2 halves into a whole and all this stuff. So you're really trying to figure out what's the best way to place these cards together. And then you get to keep one of the cards and everything else gets discarded. And then if you successfully did the action, you draw whatever card the thing tells you to draw as a result of being a success. If you fail, you do whatever thing it tells you to do that since it was a failure. And then it's just either your turn again or the next person's turn. There's really no turn order per se. As a group, you all decide, is somebody individually taking an action? Are you all taking the action together? Is player A going to go, then player B is going to go, then player C is going to go, and then player A again? Or maybe player A wants to go 4 times in a row because there's these 4 things they want to do. And you could do that. That's totally fine. There are different characters, so there is some asymmetrical powers in the game. Every character has a little bit of different ability of what they can do. And there are characters like Dr. Frankenstein, really? and Cthulhu and or Lovecraft and things like that. So those are kind of like who the characters are, and their special abilities are based off of like those things. So it's a really, really interesting game, though. We played it twice, starting with the first curse, and it was funny because after we played it the first time, we had absolutely no idea if we had done a good job or not. We had no idea if we got anywhere near close to figuring this curse out at all. Then I read some online, and my partner read a little bit online about, the first one, how it goes. And basically everyone was like, just enjoy the ride. You're going to lose probably a few times before you really understand how this game works. And I think that's pretty accurate. So if you're someone who wants a clear line of like, here's what you need to do to win, here's how you win the game, you win the game by having the most points and here are the ways you earn points. That does not happen with this game at all. Not even close. It literally is lift this curse. How? Yeah. Yep. Like that's it. There's no explanation about how to do it, where to do it, when to do it, or what you need to do it. So, yeah, it's a really cool game though. It's very inventive. It is very steeped in place. Like it really does a good job of setting the scene. And the positive things that happen make sense in context when you're trying to do an action. And if you fail, it makes sense what would happen in those cases. So yeah, they did a really nice job with it. So it is the number 17 overall ranked game on Board Game Geek. And I totally get why. I like this game a lot. I had a really good time with it. I think if you enjoy kind of going on an adventure, that was always my thing. I think of like The Hobbit right away. I'm going on an adventure. If you enjoy that kind of thing, you're going to love this game. But if you are someone who really is looking for a very clear path to victory, this might be something you're going to struggle with, because there are times when it's like, what should we do? What do you think we should do? Well, I don't know. So yeah, it's cool. I think there is some replay value to it. The hard part is that if you fail it and you go back, the general layout of the islands and everything you go to doesn't change, but the events that can happen change. But you still know that, if I go this way, then this thing is going to populate, then I have to get to this thing, and that thing will populate. So none of that changes, which makes sense, right?
Right.
But the things that can kind of happen and the unexpected things in between there can sometimes change as a result. But overall, Seventh Continent, highly recommend it. I think they are doing a more accessible version of it this year.
Okay.
I think, as what I've heard, just that's a little easier to find, because this isn't a game you can go buy in stores.
Right.
It's not something that's available, just because for them, they said the price of printing it, since there's so many cards, it's so expensive, that they're doing a pared down version that'll be a little more available, just because of that. Because I can imagine it would be a pretty hefty risk for them to go ahead and just publish a whole bunch and then send them to like local game stores. So
yeah.
But yeah, Seventh Continent, definitely I recommend it. I think it's great. The other game that got played, another super light game, finally got a Feast for Odin to the table. Designed by Uwe Rosenberg. I believe the version I have is published by Z-Man, if I recall. And, Uwe definitely known for his heavy Euros. And this game fits right in with the heavy Euro idea. The thing about Uwe Rosenberg games that I have always enjoyed and I like a lot is that learning how to play them really isn't that complicated. When you look at the games that he's designed and the things that he's done, when you look at like Agricola, you look at Caverna, how you actually play those games and what you do in those games isn't that complicated. But it's knowing what to do when given the options that's really, really hard. But anyway, in A Feast for Odin, it takes place over 12 turns, over 7 rounds, and in each round there are 12 sessions that happen, or sections of each round. And in it, it's really, honestly, 10 of the 12 are really straightforward. It's like, hey, you take a new Viking and add it to your pool, and then after that, you harvest. Like, there's very straight, spelled out things that happen. Like, for harvest, it just happens, and on this turn you get these things, and on turn 2 you get these things. It just things are spelled out for you. What is tricky about it, though, is that eventually you get to the action selection portion. And how this game works is every player has an individual player board, and then there's an action board in the center of the table. Your individual player board, when you start the game with like negative 60 points. Okay? So your goal is to acquire goods and then place these goods on your player board that cover up all of these negative points. Now, the goods are all color-coded and can only be in correlation to other goods in certain ways on your player board. So greens can't have green sides touching each other, but blues can touch anything. It doesn't matter. So it's trying to figure out and if you have red goods or orange goods, those goods can't go on your player board. But if you buy an expansion island or an expansion longhouse, they can potentially go on those. And then there's different ways that rules for how those can touch each other. But anyway, that's kind of what you're trying to do, is fill up your player board to reduce the negative points and eventually get obviously into the positive. The way you do that is through taking actions. Actions cost either anywhere from 1 to 4 meeples, depending on the action you're taking and how good the action is. But the kicker is there's 61 different actions you can take. and
it's
this
not
is where
like Seventh Continent, where there's only specific ones you can do at a time. You can do any of them, right? Whenever you want.
You can do any of those 61 actions. Now, only one person each turn can do each action. So it's not like everyone can do, whaling. But that's where the nuance and understanding the game well really comes in. Because figuring out, okay, of these 61 actions, what ones am I going to do and what order am I going to do them in? And what is the opponent possibly going to do? Because if they go whaling before I do, then I can't go whaling this turn, and whaling is really good. Or if they're going to do X and I really need to do X, is it worth me doing it now? right away, even though I really would prefer to upgrade 2 of my items first before I did this other action. So it really then becomes, there's no direct player interaction. Like, I can't give you things, you can't give me things, but I can definitely block your ability to do things that are really important for you to do by paying attention to what's going on around the table. And I will say, the first time I played this game, it took me about halfway through the game to really understand how to play the game, what's good, what's not good, what order you should potentially think about taking actions in. Because I was really struggling with covering up my player board. I couldn't figure out how to get enough goods in order to upgrade them, because most of the goods that you get aren't of high enough quality for you to put on your player board right away. You have to figure out how to upgrade them. So I was really struggling. I did really, really bad the first game. I only scored like positive 40 some points. And they say a good score is like 100. And I was like, I don't even know how in the world you get to 100.
Yeah.
And part of the actions are, there's these expansion islands you can get that add more negative points. It's more negative points right away that you have to cover up. And I was like, why would anybody get these? And then I was reading online, and people are like, oh, no, you totally get those. Those are the only way you can win the game. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I can't even get enough stuff to like fill up my regular player board. But second game came together for me a little bit better. And in game 2, I scored 99 points. Oh. So, yeah, really, I doubled my score, basically. I went up by 50. I think I went from 49 to 99, if I recall. So I actually beat my partner, which never happens in these types of games in game 2. But yeah, it's one of those games that on the surface, it seems so simple because your player board walks you through almost everything. Like how the player boards are lined out. It's like, hey, take a new Viking. So there's a specific spot on your player board that you take the Viking from, add it to your roster of Vikings that you can use. Then it's harvest. Okay, on the player board, it says in, round 2, take harvest items 1 and 2. Perfect. Take all the harvest items 1 and 2. It's like, draw a new weapon card. Okay, done. Like really straightforward stuff that you have to do. But then when you get to that action section is when it really starts to, you realize that there's a lot of depth to this game, and that the heavy weight that it is given on Board Game Geek, I think the weight is 3.85, is definitely earned and worth it. And that there is not one direct path to victory. There are multiple things that you can do. And really kind of understanding that and trying to place together, okay, if I get this item and I upgrade it 2 times, it'll fit this way on my board. But yeah, it's an amazing game. It's really, really excellent. Like I said, played over 7 rounds. There are 12 phases per round. But really, those action steps, when you start the game, I think you have 6 meeples. By the end of the game, you have 13 or 14 meeples that you're using, and really trying to figure out, do I take a lot of 1 meeple actions? Because you just keep going, right? If a person runs out of meeples and you still have meeples left, you just keep taking more actions until you're out.
Nice.
And that's actually how they determine the starting players. The last person to put a meeple is the person who's this first player the next round.
Oh.
So, yeah, so there's some advantage to using smaller numbers of meeples for actions because it'll allow you to go first in the future so that you can take those higher value actions right away and not have to worry about other people doing them. So if you're looking for a heavy Euro, if you're looking for a game that's really going to burn your brain, I can't recommend A Feast for Odin enough. I think it is a really, really excellent game. I think overall it's ranked number like 23, Board Game Geek's Top 100. And I think it's definitely worth it. I will say, though, you have to have a very patient teacher. The iconography on the boards, I think, is really good, but you have to learn what that iconography means. So I think this would be a very hard game to have no one know how to play it when you all start playing it, which is how I learned it. And that first game took a painfully long time.
Yeah.
But once you get the game down and understand it, and if you can have someone teach you who knows how to play, I think it actually teaches pretty quickly then. Then it's just up to you to how fast can your brain operate and how fast is your analysis paralysis going to set in when you're trying to figure out which of those 61 actions you're going to take on your turn. But A Feast for Odin, I absolutely adore it. I can't recommend it enough. And I think it's a great, great Euro if somebody's looking for a heavy one. So there we go. Enough about board games. Josh, what have you been playing on your television, sir?
Oh, well, let's say old reliable Apex Legends I'm still playing. Enjoying the winter event for the most part.
What does for the most part mean?
It's kind of like the Halloween event. After you do it a few times, it's a little samey, and I think that more or less shows off how much I enjoy regular Apex Legends, because even though it is same every time you play it, it doesn't feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
So for the winter event, it's like the holiday train, and you're just essentially just 3 teams of 3 just trying to take over this train, and you just keep doing it until someone gets 3 wins, if someone gets 3 wins. So it's just kind of the same thing, and if you don't have good teammates, it can be frustrating. But I've won more than I've lost, which is good. Which is good. I don't, like I said, it's been so long since we recorded a regular episode. I don't know what we've talked about. So if I am repeating myself, please forgive me for this week only, and then you can crucify me in 2 weeks. I picked up Sekiro for Kyle and I after we kind of figured we should probably at least play it since it won Game of the Year.
Indeed.
I haven't played too much of it. I played pretty much the opening mission and then some. But for me, like I said, I haven't played any of the Souls games.
Mm-hmm.
So Star Wars was my first journey into the parry system as a game that really capitalizes it on the whole. So I definitely see that in this. To me, this really feels like a Tenchu meets like Bushido Blade, for anyone who's played those games, who's as old as me. So I'm enjoying it so far. We'll see where it goes from there. But so far I'm enjoying it. I look forward to playing it some more. I started playing Blasphemous, which was part of Humble Choice last month, Humble Bundle on the PC. It's pretty crazy.
Okay.
It's basically, I don't really want to spoil anything for anyone who's curious about the game, but it's basically, maybe Lucas will back me up on this, because I don't know if he's played it yet, but I know he has it. Have you played this, Kyle?
I've not.
Okay. It's basically Dante's Inferno and Castlevania had a baby, and then that baby grew to 40 feet tall and tried to kill you. That's what Blasphemous is. It's very monstery. It's very dark. It's very, fire and brimstone-y. Very biblical in its inspirations, which is where you see most of the Dante's Inferno reference stuff. But so far, very cool looking game. I'm just trying to decide if it's over the top to be over the top, or if it's over the top to serve a purpose. And I haven't gotten far enough to decide for myself what that is. Go ahead. Sorry.
Is this the side-scrolling action platformy game?
I wouldn't call it platformy yet. Maybe it gets platformy. That's the Castlevania aspect of it. It's more It's more Castlevania than anything.
Okay.
The only comparison I give to Dante's Inferno is the graphic design.
Because it was a Kickstarter, wasn't it?
I believe it was. I think it was a Kickstarter.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to make sure I'm thinking of the
guy with the giant
same game.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Dunce cap,
okay.
if you will. Yeah. Well, that is a spoiler. I wanted to say something he does, but it's a spoiler, and it would ruin a funny part. Well, funny not intentionally. Okay. And then finally, I really feel like there's been more. I've been messing around with Stadia a bit. Nothing to report that is noteworthy. Which is a bummer. But yeah, so yesterday, I started my first playthrough of New Game Plus of Horizon Zero Dawn, which is something Kyle and I talked about last week after we recorded, and I think I mentioned it when we recorded with Donnie that I wanted to revisit it. Mm-hmm. So it's my first. My wife was like, didn't you play this already? She's watching me play it. And I'm like, at 4 a.m. on Saturday morning. I'm like, yeah, I couldn't sleep. And I was like, when I played Horizon Zero Dawn the first time, it was on a base PS4 and a regular 1080p TV, and now I have a
Mhm.
PS4 Pro and a 4K TV and a new 4K TV, newer than my old one, which is redundant. I have upgraded since, I should say, in 4K. So it really, I don't want to say it feels like a new game. It certainly doesn't, because I'm very familiar with how to play this game. However, it looks like it could have just come out last week graphically, which shows how well it has held up, because obviously the graphics haven't changed since, unless they patched it for 4K, but I'm pretty sure it was 4K support when it came out.
Yeah.
So, it hasn't really changed graphically since it came out, but for me, it's a big difference, definitely notable. And it handles for HDR nicely, which I can say that not every game on, and I'm not just singling out the PS4, but for this circumstance, I've had more issues with HDR on my PS4 than on my Xbox. So I was a little worried about that when I was doing the HDR setup, but it actually looks fantastic. So yeah, I'm just enjoying my time. I put in a few hours on Saturday. I just plan on keep on playing, and I have a bunch of I can level up 10 more levels, which is awesome.
Yep.
And there's a couple more skills I think that were included with the Frozen Wilds DLC.
Yep.
So there's already more stuff for me to do, which is exciting, because I was a little worried that I was going to be a little bored. But even from go, I was enjoying killing robot dinosaurs right away. It felt so good, and I was remembering like how much fun it is to target different parts of the animals and to use different ammo and set up traps, and how easy it is to do traps, because I forgot when they're talking about using the tripcaster. I'm like, oh man, do I have to go and set up? I had forgotten. Like, do I have to go set a line and then walk over and place it? And I'm like, oh no, I just shoot it.
Yeah.
Like, perfect. So it's been a bit, but yeah, I'm really excited to relive that. And I have one of those memories that I'm not sure how many people have this, but like, I can watch a TV show forever, because I don't necessarily retain every element. And like, if I watch an episode of Futurama today, that I could probably tell you, like, recite lines while watching it, there's still things I don't remember. So I'm always viewing things like that with fresh eyes. So I really feel like with Horizon, there's already been a lot of stuff just revisiting the conversation trees with characters that I had forgotten about, or that maybe I didn't fully listen the first time I played. So far, so great. And those are my 4 games.
Awesome. Well, I'll still stay on the Horizon train then, because I also have started my playthrough of New Game Plus for Horizon Zero Dawn. And I will say it is a little interesting how they have you go into the New Game Plus.
Oh, yeah.
Because you do have to go into your current save.
That was a pain in the butt.
Yeah, so you have to go into your current save and then do like I want to save this as my New Game Plus character.
Yeah.
And then exit your current game and then start New Game Plus, which was a little odd. You would just think they would just pick up, but whatever, that's cool. I'm not a programmer. I don't know how this works. But what is a little weird about it, and I think I'm going to be interested to see how this goes for the rest of the game, because I don't remember. Like you, I have a really bad memory when it comes to these sorts of things. Like, no matter how many times I've played like the Uncharted trilogy, like I will forget characters' names, or or I guess there's 4 games, 5 games, 6 games, kind of. Anyway, I really struggle with that. Whereas like Donnie can just like rattle off all these characters' names, and I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, I think that happened after this one thing, but I really don't remember that well.
Yeah,
and it's nothing to do with my affinity for it. I just have a poor memory. Anyway, when the game starts, like the first mission that you have to go do is like, oh, go talk to so-and-so, get this thing, yada, yada, yada. And then as soon as you're done talking to the character, who gives you that, it's like, done, because you have all the things already, right?
Yeah.
You have the trip gas, you have all the stuff. And then it's like, well, okay. I guess I went and did all of those things.
Yeah.
So then I was like, well, can I still go talk to that character even who I had to get the thing from? Where are they? Because now the point tells me to go to the end.
Yeah.
But where were they? You know, so I wonder how much of that stuff is going to happen. And I didn't know, you know, going in if they would take some things away from you or kind of how it would work. And clearly they're just letting you keep absolutely everything.
Yeah.
And I have like 17,000 pieces of scrap metal. So no big deal. Can make
Just sell
arrows
it
for
all.
days. I can make arrows for days.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I fell right back into it. I was a little worried that I wouldn't remember how the combat and all that stuff worked. And it took no time really to kind of fall back into it. I'm only played for about an hour so far, but yeah, really simple to get back into. Felt kind of like putting on a comfortable pair of shoes. But I'm really excited to play through it, especially with January, I think, being a little slower for new releases that I want to jump into. I'm really looking forward to getting this new game plus done and playing Frozen Wilds for the first time because I haven't played it ever. So I'm very excited about that. Also want to talk a little bit. I did play some more Call of Duty. Actually had an entire day over break here where a friend of mine and I, all we did all day long was play Call of Duty, literally from like 10 in the morning until like 2 in the morning.
Oh, jeez.
So it was a long day of Call of Duty. Let me just say, the Battle Pass for Call of Duty, it is a grind. Like, it's cool that they went this route rather than doing DLC and splitting up the player base and they're just giving maps and all of this stuff. Like, that's great. But this Battle Pass, my lord, is it a grind. And they don't tell you how much experience you need for each level. And you don't really know exactly how the experience you're getting is counting towards going up. Like, is it my overall experience? Is it like my weapon experience? Do those both count? When I complete a challenge, does that count differently than my other experience? How much experience is there between levels? Is it how much time I was in a game? Does that matter at all? They don't tell you any of this. There's no, like, your bar goes up some. And you're like, okay, great. I guess I'm closer. That's awesome. So it is absolutely a grind to get this done. I definitely don't think I'm going to finish the 100 levels. I'm on like 50 right now, and I have played overall, and obviously I played a lot before the first season. I think right now I'm in the 50-hour ballpark of online play. From what some people on the Call of Duty Reddit have said, is they figure it's going to be for the average player of almost 200 hours of multiplayer to finish the Battle Pass.
That's insane.
And I get that you have some people who will finish that in the first month, but I can't imagine that's most people, right? Like, I don't know. It just seems a little unreasonable to me.
I'm out of touch with the Call of Duty player. I can tell you that just from talking to the guys I work with who are Call of Duty players and have just played this game 10 times as much as you have. And even what you've played is monumental compared to whatever I would even be able to get to in Call of Duty.
Yeah, I don't know. That was a lot of nonsense I just said there. I think the thing that I still find fascinating about Call of Duty is that there is still no skill-based matchmaking. And I don't understand that. And we're recording this January 5th. In like 3 weeks, they're kicking off Activision's new Call of Duty League that's city-based, right? The inaugural weekend's happening in Minneapolis, not too far from me.
Yeah.
All the teams are going to be there. They're all going to be playing competitive Call of Duty. There's no ranked matchmaking in Call of Duty still. So I'm playing games of Call of Duty where I'm sometimes winning 75-25 and sometimes losing 75-25.
Yeah.
Because you're in the game and then your team gets down early, so everyone quits. So now it's 6v2. So you're like, well, this is great. This is going to go swell.
Yeah.
And the servers are still not that great. Like, there are times where I will, on my screen, I shoot people and get hit markers, and then when I watch the kill cam, I never hit them. Because I die, I'm like, how did I die? And then they show the kill cam, and the player never got hit by me.
Oh, no.
These things still and I don't understand how a game that is ostensibly the biggest console game. I mean, people always talk about being the biggest franchise, which I guess in a lot of ways it is, but like League of Legends and all that other stuff obviously have more concurrent players. But I don't understand how a game that is this successful, that has a competitive league behind it, that has people who play it as seriously as they do, still has issues like this that have always existed. Like, these are not things that have gone away, that like the server stuff was better before and it's gotten worse again. But like, I don't understand how this is still a thing with them. So anyway, that's my rant about Call of Duty. Am I still going to play it? Of course I am, because I'm stupid. But yeah, so a little frustrated there. To get away from the frustration, though, the partner and I started playing Lego Star Wars The Force Awakens. We were looking for a game for us to play together, and I had gotten this a long time ago, and I just never played it, so I downloaded it and started playing it. And, I really like the Lego games, other than, man, are they janky sometimes. There's so many bugs in those games.
There is, because there's so much going on. It's insane, like...
Yeah, I mean, because they have to account for so many different things, but twice I have had errors that have caused the game to crash completely. And both times then, like, it loaded back up, which was fine, and loaded back into where the save was, which was fine. But then I would finish the story, and not that this is a huge deal, but then I didn't get the trophy for finishing the level.
Well, I know that
then
people can argue it's not a big deal, but I know to you it is.
It is, because then I went. Then did I replay the level? Absolutely, I did. Because am I going to get the platinum in this stupid game? Well, unless there's a bug like there was in the Harry Potter season 1 through 4, which didn't let me get the platinum. Yeah, I'm going to. So anyway, so started playing that. It's fun. It's dumb. It's more Lego stuff. They did do a few things to improve upon it. So much so that I am interested in their entire collection that they're releasing this year, because they're doing like a 1 through 9 collection this year. And I am interested to see what that is, because apparently they are remaking all of the early games. Like, it's not just like upgrades to those. Like, they are remaking all of the previous Star Wars games. I would assume Force Awakens will be the same one, but then also making them for 8 and 9. So interested in that. Probably won't get it day one, but when it goes on super cheap sale, like Lego games always do, I will pick that up. Also, was committed to trying to, based off the goals that you had said for 2020 and video gaming, I am trying to play my Switch more. Have started Luigi's Mansion 3. This game is absolutely adorable. It is so charming and so fun and so cool. And Luigi just makes me laugh. He's scared of absolutely everything, which you would think, at some point you'd be sick of being scared. Yeah. Not Luigi. He is scared all the time of all the things. But it's great. Nintendo always does an excellent job of putting a lot of charm into their games, of really creating a sense of place really well. And they do that fantastically with this game. I have no idea how long it is. I don't know, how much time it'll take me to finish it, but I am enjoying my time with it. And it's something that I, pick up and play for 15, 20 minutes every day since I started playing it in the late December. So really enjoying my time there. And then finally, the only other thing is I had talked about Children of Morta on our Game of the Year podcast. I have finished the game. I have the platinum in the game. It is spectacular. They released recently a roadmap for the expansions, the DLC, like all the stuff they're going to do for it, and I'm really excited for those. Again, I don't know. There's a lot of really good indies this year. I totally recognize that. I don't know why this game isn't getting more buzz. I know you've played it a little bit. I'm guessing you're not as taken with it as I am.
No, I actually really surprisingly found myself... Well, I told you, I paused it and went out of the house and ran errands for 8 hours and left it paused because I wanted to continue the level I was on, even though I wasn't doing I was playing poorly. I found it to be a little difficult, especially the lack of healing.
Yep.
So what I thought would be frustrating really reminded me more of the charm of Dead Cells for me.
Yeah.
So I did enjoy it, and it's definitely something I want to visit. But here's my problem is I don't often turn my PlayStation on. And that will change for a little bit with Horizon Zero Dawn, but I literally use my Xbox for everything. So if I'm sitting and I find myself with 30 minutes to kill,
right,
it's a game on my Xbox because I'm already on the Xbox. So
right,
if I was watching stuff on my PlayStation, Children of Morta would be an easy pick this up for 30 minutes and play, and then or maybe not put it back down, because you also can't just play for 30 minutes. Sometimes it's a little bit longer than that.
Yeah. No, I hear you. So yeah, great game though. Really loved it. Looking forward to what they do with it in the future. And dear listener, I encourage you, if you have, it is on everything. literally everything, I think, at this point. Pick it up. If you have a Switch, I think that's a great platform for it. If you care about achievements and trophies, the list is very doable on Xbox and PlayStation, so definitely encourage you to get it. Yeah, I love the game. I think it's awesome. So that's kind of a list of all the things I've been playing. Josh, let's move on. Let's get to our topic of the show. This week, we're going to talk a little bit about reviews. And I know we've talked about reviews in the past, but one of the bigger players in the world decided to make some changes. So no matter your feelings about IGN, their influence on the game review industry really is undeniable. And they recently announced a revision to their review scoring scale for all the reviews they do. So not just games, but movies, TV, comics, everything. They've gone away from the 100-point system that they used to have, and they're replacing it with a 10-point system. So no more 7.5, 7.7s, 7.9s. A game gets a 7 or a game gets an 8. That is it. There's no more 7.5s. While there's a lot of discussion about reviews, if they should be numbered or if they even matter, there's really currently no way to get away from them, right? You see advertisements for games highlighting the amazing reviews they've gotten. They have some games, developers have their Metacritic score of their games influence their bonuses and things like that. So with that, Josh, it's time. We are going to create the perfect scale to review both board games and video games. That could be numeric. It could be a word thing. It could be whatever we want it to be, but we're going to come up with the perfect scale to do this. Sound like a plan?
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to succeed in doing that.
It's going to be awesome. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with, we'll talk about IGN's new scale.
Yeah.
So it's a scale of 1 to 10, like I said. 10 being a masterpiece, obviously not perfect, a masterpiece. 9 is amazing. 8 is great. 7 is good. 6 is okay. 5 is mediocre. 4 is bad, 3 is awful, 2 is painful, and 1 is unbearable. So, that is IGN's scale now. Do you think that is the perfect scale for scoring games?
I don't know. 3 awful? Like, I get it. 3 is low, and that's a 10-point scale. It's definitely... It is what it is. I don't think it's perfect, no. But I'm torn because I've always had this. So I've worked retail, not anymore, thank God, but so much of my life. Or I guess if you ever think of a performance review score, what we were, and I don't even necessarily agree with this, but we were always told as management, never give a 5.
Right.
A 5 means there's no room for improvement. They're doing everything perfectly. If you give someone a 5, they should have your job. And I'm like, okay. Which,
depending on the definition of the scale, like it could mean that.
So I don't know. So what do I think about this scale? I think 10 should be flawless. 1 should be unplayable. That's what I think is the difference.
So do you think it would ever be possible, and this actually is a good segue, do you think it's possible then, should a game ever receive a perfect score?
I think it's possible for a game to get a perfect score, but I really feel like if you want someone to shoot for 10 and feel good about getting a 10, it shouldn't be very easy to get a 10. There should be one game that has gotten a 10. Not 5 games in a calendar year. I think that's the difference for me, in my brain at least, is that 10s shouldn't be as common as they are. And I'm not saying that a game isn't a 10. I'm just saying, because maybe we have a calendar year where 10 games are perfect. But it also depends on what they decide to measure in a game. Are they including audio? Are they including controls? How deep are they getting? What is this that they? And I know they list it. I know one of the links that you gave me, but it might have been a different site lists the things that they look for. If you give a game a 1, you're really beating the crap out of that game and that developer and that studio. It really should be for a reason as well. Like
Right.
if you're gonna dig someone a hole and you're gonna throw them in it, you might as well have a good reason for doing that.
Right. So I think my big concern with, and I know the counter argument to this, so I'll talk about it in a second. My big concern when I look at a scale like this, and I think, we'll talk about GameSpot and Game Informer and all those other ones as well. And when we're talking about this, I am talking about it in the context of board games as well. The problem is there isn't a board game site like IGN, GameSpot,
Right.
or Game Informer. Like there are people who review board games and give them scores, but there's no major player, right? There's like the Dice Tower's like, oh, we approve, like we think this game is good. There are small sites that say, oh, we give this a 4.5 out of 5 stars, but there's no.
It's mostly users that are giving it scores.
Yeah, exactly. It is much more user focused. So when I think about this, though, like 5 mediocre, 4 bad, 3 awful, 2 painful, 1 unbearable. What's the difference?
Yeah, that's also a good question.
And one could argue, okay, well, you're basically making it a 5-point scale then, right? Because anything 6 or lower, all is just bad.
Right.
So
That's
you're really
true.
making it a 5-point scale then of 10 through 6 because anything. Do you think a 5-point scale? Let me back up. Do you like more ways to rate games or fewer?
I think it gets a little muddy when you give too many options, especially for game and board game reviews. It was funny because I read the notes while we were at lunch, and my wife was like, "What's that face for?" And I was like, "Well, I just read what we're doing, and she's like, "What?" And I was like, "Oh, we're just going to create the perfect scale to review board games and video games." No problem. She's like, "Ah." When I looked through the links, so like we're going to talk about Game Informer, GameSpot, and Eurogamer, and I don't remember which one had the 5-point scale. I really think the 5-point scale is the best scale. But giving you the 0.5s in there, I don't know. Like, it's still technically a 10-point scale if you look at it that way. But I think it's more in depth, at least on the face. It looks more in depth than like what is a 3.5 compared to on a scale of 5 compared to a 5 on a scale of 10. Like what's the differences between the two of those? Are they even close? Who's like, can you compare a 3.5 out of 5 and a 5 out of 10? Like, I feel like it gives you more room to be constructive with your criticism about a game.
Right. So all these, I think, GameSpot, Game Informer, and IGN all use 10-point scales. Eurogamer uses like a recommend, not recommend system. But what I think is super interesting about this, and this is so nerdy. So, GameSpot's 10 says they think the game is essential, right? They're not saying that it is a perfect game, but they're saying it is an essential game for people to play.
Yeah.
Perfect. Game Informer's 10 means the game is outstanding. Okay?
Which is similar, yeah.
Yep. And then IGN's is masterpiece, right?
Which is a little bit higher, yeah.
Okay. 9 for GameSpot is superb. Game Informer's 9 is superb.
Okay.
IGN's is amazing.
Which is the same. It's just different adjectives.
Okay. Now 8 for GameSpot is great. Game Informer is very good.
Yeah.
And IGN is great. Okay.
Yeah.
Here's where things get interesting. 7 for GameSpot is good. For Game Informer is average.
Okay.
And for IGN is good.
That could explain why Game Informer gives so many games a 7 or higher in their review scores.
And then the last one I'll do for 6, GameSpot is fair. Game Informer is limited appeal, and IGN is okay. So,
yeah,
and here's what's really interesting is there is research out there. There's been science done about when you're creating a Likert scale, which this is. You have a 1 through 10. You can only pick, individual numbers between them. You can't pick in between. There has been research done that shows like if you say something is good, what would be one standard deviation better than that? Like, what is the word that is one standard deviation better? And what is the word that is one standard deviation worse? Like, there's research done that shows, like, what those words are for the average person. I don't know. Obviously, they're all not following that because the words aren't the same. But, like, that stuff exists out there. And I wonder, what is the thought process in coming up with amazing versus, superb? Like, who decided, like, no, we're going to use superb versus we're going to use amazing?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Is it one person developing the scale for a company, or is it a group of people at a table who are just agreeing on something? Because your 6 and my 6, totally different.
Right.
And for me, I still think a 6 is an average game.
Right.
And I tend to even think of 5 can technically be an average game on a scale of 10.
Right.
That's a 3.5-ish. 3.25. So we've had conversations about this in the BWVG Discord about like people thinking 6s are like, everyone has their opinion on a 6, and some games shouldn't be getting this. Or a 6 is bad. Don't play it if it's a 6. I won't buy a game unless it's higher than a 7. I get that, but there's so many variables going into a review score. Never even mind the number, because you have to, like, something that I think it was Eurogamer. They were like, we're going to do our best to put a person who is experienced in that genre of game to review it.
Right.
That is very important.
Yeah.
Because if someone is, but it's also very important to know that as a consumer, because if I went to read a Outer Worlds review, not being a fan of Fallout, as I was, and someone who has only played Fallout games and only reviewed Fallout games, they're going to be like, whatever their score is, an 8 out of 10 or a 5 out of 10, but they're going to be like, I was expecting Fallout, or this is just like Fallout. Like, you're subjected to that as well. So it's almost like I don't want a number system. But I think it's still important, the way that people look at reviews, to have a number, just so it's easier for people to relate to.
Right. How much do you think the American school system plays into this? That 70% is a C.
Yeah.
And that's quote unquote average work. Is what it's supposed to be.
Sure.
Do you think that is what influences people to be like, oh, if it's below a 7, it's bad? Is that why Game Informer scale says 7 is average?
Maybe, but I'm like, hey, a C+? All right, I'm doing great. So I'll take it. You're telling me this game we got a 6 out of 10? That's a D. You're passing, my friend. No, I think it definitely has something to do with it, because I definitely look at least I look at 10-point scales on like a grading system.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like 5-point scales are a little bit different, but with the 0.5s, it's a little easier to like figure it out.
Right. And and I didn't want to bring this topic up because I think that any of these sites are doing a bad job. Obviously, they're far more knowledgeable than I am about the best way to do reviews. I'm sure they all have knowledge about criticism and have read about criticism more than I have, and about the best way to critique and review things. But yeah. I do think it's an interesting conversation to have about, because for better or for worse, these are the things that stoke, how like is really, you have to love or hate things these days, right? Like there's no in between anymore.
I wish it wasn't that way, but yeah.
But it seems that way, right? Yeah. Like all of the internet traffic, all of the conversations online tend to be about loving or hating things, not about things being fine or good, or that was a good experience, And do you think score, and I think you kind of answered this, do you think though that having a score is essential, that games, board games, video games, movies, comic books, there should be a score they are given?
I think, yes. But I can also very easily see a world without it. I just think it's something you have to ease people into, just like this whole thing with, like, not that it's comparable, but games going to all digital. Like, it's something you need to ease people into, and what people are comfortable with is a score. And when someone says, you saw a movie, what would you give it? Out of 5 stars, out of 10, whatever. Like, that's like that. Those are common questions. Until we get to the point where someone's like, well, did you like it? Yeah, I liked it. Okay, great. Do you think I would like it? Yeah, I think so. Well, why? Well, because of this. That's a whole different conversation. That's more than how many stars did you give it? But right now, like, I still rate movies on a 5-star scale, and but I'm hesitant to give a video game a number score. So I don't know what the disconnect is for me, or maybe I've just moved on number scores for games. But I think that in general, people still look for it, and it's also a power move for people who want to have their voice heard, and we see that with Metacritic.
Do you, and I mean, heck, we do huge shows every fall and spring about Metacritic. Like, we're obviously as guilty about this as anyone. Do you, when there's a game you're interested in, do review scores impact your decision to buy games at all? How do you use review scores?
They still impact me, just not as much. Obviously, with things like Twitch and Mixer, I have other ways to judge a game. But for games that I would buy before they release, I really think review scores like stop me from buying Ghost Recon Breakpoint.
Right.
That might be the first game in a while that a review scores really stopped me from buying a game. So yeah, I still pay attention to them. And I think that if the problems we have is like if you look at a game like Death Stranding where the numbers are all over the place,
right?
That's where review scores are not very helpful to me, and I can't imagine anyone else. But a game like Ghost Recon where everyone's giving it a 5 or a 2 out of 5, like that's a little bit easier to assess the quality of the game.
So what do you do then for board games? Since they don't get those kind of reviews, right?
Board games is another animal. I look at a board game. I'll watch like a Dice Tower review. So the thing with board games, because there aren't as many reviewer options, it's easier for me to align my likes and dislikes with a certain person. So I know that if that person liked this game, there's a higher chance of me liking it. Doesn't mean I'm going to like it.
Right.
But if I watch Dice Tower and I see Tom or Z talk about a game they like, I know I like a lot of games that they enjoy. But if I saw Sam review a game, but it still looked interesting to me, I know that we have very opposite tastes in games.
Right.
So if he liked it, I might just not be interested, period. Or I might like it, just I'd have to do more research into it. So it's definitely more difficult with board games. And I don't check Board Game Geek as often as I should. Honestly, a lot of my board game purchases are based on how they look before how they play, which is weird nowadays.
Well, the whole don't judge a book by its cover, but they, book companies spend a lot of money getting cover art for books just the way they want it to, and I think the same is true for board games. I think what's really interesting about board games, and I was trying to draw a parallel to video games, and I don't know if it works, and I don't know, but maybe it does, so I would love your input on it. When I think of board games, right, I think of I talked about A Feast for Odin tonight, and Uwe Rosenberg. Yeah. And that I like A Feast for Odin, I like Caverna, I like Agricola. So if Uwe Rosenberg designs a game, there's a high chance that I'm probably going to at least like it, if not love it.
Yeah.
Do you think that whole who the designer is mentality, obviously you have the Kojimas and things like that in video games. Do you think that holds true in both places? Do you think in board games we can more reliably rely on designers because they produce more games compared to how many games we get from video game producers? What are your thoughts and feelings on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I just think the volume of video games, it does make it hard to follow specific game designers. Obviously, Kojima found that following. And Tim Schafer and Jaffe and there's a lot of people out there that are doing and Amy Hennig and stuff like that. But it's different in the board game world because you specifically front and center look at a designer's name. And yes, in video games, the games generally aren't the same. I know if I get an Emerson game, there's definitely going to be similar mechanisms or play styles to them, and it's not always the same in video games. Or like, I mean, you use Rosenberg, like, yeah, you know what you're getting when you get, to a certain extent, when you get a Rosenberg game. So yeah, maybe in the board game world they're more Rockstar-ish quality than they are in video game world, with the exception of maybe Kojima. But yeah, you're right. It is a weird thing, and I know, like Antoine Bauza, like my friend, he'll buy any game that he makes without playing it, even if he never heard of it. He bought the Attack on Titan 2 game, and he's never seen Attack on Titan.
Right.
But he's like, it's a Bowser game, so I have to get it. And I'm like, okay. Yeah. And he's like, it's actually really good. It's very similar to his other games. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's how those board games work.
Yeah. Or like Stefan Feld, or, you know, I think that's what's true. But I think what was interesting, though, when you started naming people from video games, right? Like you talked about, you know, Amy Hennig. What was the last game she shipped? Uncharted 3?
Yeah, you're right. I guess I more associate them with projects than games specifically that they've created.
Yeah, because like I think Hennig, she might have done writing on like one of the games when she got to EA for a different game, but like I think what Uncharted 3 in like 2011 was like the last real game she shipped. Yeah, you know, Jaffe, he had Drawn to Death, but that thing crashed and burned.
Twisted Metal.
And prior to that was like Twisted Metal in like 2012.
Yeah,
you know, and that's what I think is so interesting. We have these people in the video game industry, and then we're obviously diverting a little bit from reviews here, but we have these people in the video game industry that we follow and we know what their names are, but man, some of these people haven't shipped games in close to a decade now.
That's true. Yeah, you're right. That's definitely more prevalent in board gaming.
Okay, so here's what we need to do now, Josh. If you were the founder of PSVG,
yeah,
or whatever we want to call it,
I'd be rich.
That's why Donnie's so rich. It's because of PSVG. Okay, let's say that you started IGN. You were the person in charge of IGN.
Yeah.
And IGN was now going to start doing board games, and you had to create a scale for rating board games, video games, everything that they do.
Yeah.
What scale are you creating? What do you think is going to be the best thing for you to be able to critically review something, but also for your readers to be able to understand what you mean? Are you using a 10-point, a 5-point? Are you using words/recommendations? Like, what are you going to do?
I think for me, like, I don't have a problem with the 10-point scale. I really don't. Mm-hmm. But I feel like it's too broad for me. I would prefer a 5-point scale just because it's what I'm familiar with, and that's how I've already been rating movies on a 5-point scale my whole life.
Right.
When video games were young, it was still a 5-point scale, so I'm comfortable with it. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a bigger impact. Like you pointed it out, like what's the difference between a 7, 8, and 9, and a 10? If they're all going to be just different adjectives, well, maybe not a 10. For like these games, like there's a little, for me, it just feels like there's a little bit more of a weight between a 4 and a 4.5, or a 3.5 and a 4.5 than there would be a 7 and a 9.
So when you say a 5-point scale, are you saying with half numbers?
Yeah,
or are you saying,
it's still a 10-point scale technically, but like,
right.
I just feel like a 4.5 feels to me much different than a 7 or an 8 or a 9.
Okay.
And I don't know, I can't necessarily explain why that is. Mm-hmm. But I think really what it does is it eliminates that weird 6 and 7 judgmental review. I still think on a 5 scale, a 3 is still a decent game. Mm-hmm. It's not bad, but you put a 6 in front of someone's face and all of a sudden it's the worst thing they ever saw. I'm not going to buy that game. It's a 6.
Right.
So, and I mean, that's just how I see it. I feel like it gives you a little bit less room to be vague about a review, if that makes sense.
Do you think that any of that is because, you know, when you look at the movie world,
yeah,
and you look at especially summer blockbusters, the movies that quote unquote most people see,
yeah,
that a lot of those are 3s.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas in video games, the games that a lot of people play are 9s.
Yeah, because
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do know what you're saying. you can, I still feel like, so that and that like example, if we're doing like a 6 in a video game out of a 10 scale, like I think you can still enjoy that game, maybe like a summer blockbuster, like you're using that as an example. Like there's still, sixes can be good in the way that some people might have liked Wild Wild West in July of 2004 or whatever year it came out in. Yeah, and for other people, they're not into that, and that's fine. Right. They're more into the critically acclaimed stuff. Maybe it's a movie snob scale. Maybe it's like, I prefer Citizen Kane to Wild Wild West. Well, I liked Independence Day more than Casablanca, so take that.
Right. I do wonder, as video games mature and become older, if the critic base will become more of similar to what you see in books and in film and in those art mediums that have been around longer, where the boutique smaller thing is the thing that gets the 9 and the 10 and wins the awards, and the mass appeal thing does not score as high. Because if you look at, Call of Duty, Madden, FIFA, those games tend to still score pretty well. Like, it's not like those games are getting 5s and 6s.
Yeah.
So I think if I was going to create a system, my system would be really boring and people would not like it, and it would be recommended or not recommended.
There's nothing wrong with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And
it would not just say that. It'd be like recommended for if you like XYZ, and that would be it. Like, I think that's like what my system would be, because and this is going to probably sound snobbish, I think there is so much lost in just looking at a number, and I feel like that's what so many people do, right? And when you look at the fanboy wars and all the stupid console war stuff that people get up in arms about, it's, Nintendo and PlayStation have all these exclusives that have scores in the upper 90s. What does Xbox have? And if we just got rid of that, like, games were recommended or they weren't. It was, boom. Like, you can just decide whether you want to play this thing. We think you'd like it if you like these other games, or if you like this style of game, or you like these experiences, or, hey, we can't recommend this. Like, you might like it if you like these things, but because of technical issues and whatever, we just can't recommend this game.
Right.
I just, I don't know. I feel like we lose so much when we just go to numbers. And I understand. We do Metafall and Metaspring. Like, numbers are fun. When I know when a game review embargo is up, I go look and see how it's scoring to get an idea of how people are feeling about it. Like, I think there's a value there, but I feel like the value that added or does add has gotten to the point where it's almost more of a detriment now than it used to be.
Yeah, you want the Netflix system.
Yeah, like thumbs up, thumbs down.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. You can still not recommend something and also not say it's bad. Like, that's something that you can do, and I think it's more. It's more fair to your audience by saying, I didn't like this, but you might like this,
right?
If you like these games,
right? And I think part of the thing that I struggle with too, and I think it hasn't happened much yet, but I do wonder about, how is a one-person development studio supposed to be scored on the same scale as a $250 million budget game.
Yeah.
And it does. And I think there, as someone who really enjoys food, and you think about the culinary world, should a mom and pop restaurant be judged by a critic as the same way they would judge a restaurant that is $250 minimum a person?
Right.
Part of me says yes, because the food can still be really good either way, right? Like, you don't necessarily need to have years of culinary training and have refined technique that you learned in France and when you were, staunching for whatever fancy place. But it also feels like it's almost setting up for an unfair situation, right? Like, the critic who goes into a really fancy restaurant probably has certain expectations that the mom and pop place either can't meet or doesn't care to meet. They're trying to do something different. They're not trying to necessarily play in that same field. So should they be judged by the same field? And that's what I think doing like a recommended makes it so all of those things are the same, right? Like, hey, yeah, this place is great. We recommend it if you're looking for really good food and affordable price for you in an awesome environment. Or yes, this place is recommended because if you're looking for an upscale, high class situation that you can celebrate a special occasion. Like, that scale works for everything. And I think it takes into account the strengths of what every situation or every different thing brings. So, final question for you before we move to wrapping things up, Josh. What do you think it would take, or what do you think we'll ever have a board game website equivalent to GameSpot, IGN, Game Informer, Eurogamer, anything like that? Because Board Game Geek isn't, right? It is user reviews. Yes, there
it's
are
unwieldy.
Yes, there are links to reviews from quote-unquote professional game reviewers. But there is there's really no Metacritic. There's really no OpenCritic. There are Reddit threads where people on Reddit will go through and compile people's reviews for the years to say, like, hey, based off of these 30 reviewers and board games, here are the top 10 games of the year. But there is no, like, IGN for board games. Do you think that will ever happen?
I mean, we're on the right track. Like, you can't open up a magazine now without someone you didn't expect having board game reviews or board game topics. So I think it's like on the way. I don't know who would take that step to get it going, but it's definitely something that I could see happening in the next couple of years for sure.
Then here's the next question. Do you think that should happen / do you want that to happen? Do you think that's a good thing?
The selfish part of me doesn't want it to happen, but more exposure is better for board games. So yeah, I would love to see it happen, just so we get it into the popular culture. I mean, board games are for everyone, so there should be more access to them.
Yeah, I do wish, like some of the sites, especially IGN with Matt Miller, or not IGN, Game Informer with Matt Miller and stuff, you are starting to see more and more and more tabletop articles at these places. Obviously, Adam is doing it with game reviews and things like that. So, I think it's coming. I don't know if we're ever going to get to a full-blown situation where those places are reviewing games on the same scales as their video games, but I think it would be interesting if that started to happen. And how broad, like how many games they started to review. Or if it was just like the big hitters that like started to push out into the mass, your Wingspans and things like that are getting like a ton of attention. So, all right. Well, that was a fun conversation. I don't know that we came to creating the perfect scale, but I think we both have a good idea of what we'd want to see if we created a scale. And that's the important thing. So, dear listener, if you have ideas about what you'd like a review scale to be, or should there be review scales, let us know. We'd love to talk about it. Josh.
Hi.
I think it's time we probably think about wrapping up. What do you say?
I think we should do a well-rounded life first.
That sounds great to me, sir. Obviously, we are a gaming podcast, but we do want to leave you with one recommendation, suggestion, or thing we are currently into that's helping us live a well-rounded life. Josh, what is your recommendation for our dear listeners?
Mine is a movie that I have slept on for a while. In fact, I was inspired by Lucas of PSVG Prime and Flux to Post. Watched an astounding amount of movies last year to get better at watching movies, which I used to love to do. So my goal for this year was just to watch more movies, and that's what I started doing. Taking some time away from sleeping, perhaps, or game playing. But I have HBO Now or Go or on demand, whatever you want to call it. And I got a notification on my phone saying like, these movies are leaving this month. And one of the movies that I had been wanting to watch and just hadn't pulled the trigger on was Bad Times at the El Royale, which is something that when the trailer came out for theaters, it looked really interesting. I really wanted to see it, but I don't get to go to the theaters anymore. So I never caught it. It's like, that's a good time to watch it before it goes away, at least on HBO. So I didn't really know what to expect from this movie. I can tell you it has John Hamm and Jeff Bridges and Dakota Johnson and Chris Hemsworth, among others, in this movie. So it has a good cast. And I don't know I don't want to describe it by spoiling it, because I'm sure people haven't seen this movie. It kind of flew, I believe, under the radar of a lot of people. But it's very Tarantino-esque as far as the way it's shot. If you've ever seen the movie Four Rooms, it definitely has some similarities with that. But it's essentially the El Royale is a hotel that is on the California-Nevada line. And it's very much a product of its generation. They don't really update it. It definitely is in the, I want to say, 50s or 60s as far as the era that it was built. But it's a very interesting place where maybe the best people don't go to, and maybe some nice people wouldn't want to be there. And essentially the movie is just some people that are all interesting characters, a la like Clue or Murder on the Orient Express. Kind of meet each other, talk, go on their separate ways, and then things start to get interesting. I would also compare it to Identity, if you saw that movie with John Cusack way back when. And then something happens in the middle of the movie that shakes the whole thing up. Maybe the third act. That really is unexpected and interesting. So what I would say about this movie is every character is interesting. And it truly is, at least the way I gave it a 4 out of 5, speaking of reviews. But the way I worded it is just if you take the story out, which is still a very good story, it's like an acting masterclass by, like, I don't know that I've seen Jeff Bridges act this good in a film before. He probably has. I'm just looking at it as a current watch, but like his acting was incredible. Every actor stood on their own 2 feet. Like, you really, they carried their own story. You really were invested in what they were doing and why they were there. It was just an excellent film. It's a very high recommendation from me. But it is a little violent if you're anti-violence. Maybe, I mean, I did say it's Tarantino-esque. So less feet, equal amounts of violence.
Okay. And it's interesting too, because Drew Goddard is he's done a lot of really good stuff.
Yeah. I actually looked him up to see who he was, like who the director was, because it was so Tarantino-esque. I was like, maybe he was a producer on this, because it really feels like he could have done this.
Yeah, but I mean, because he wrote for, Buffy and Angel and Alias, and he wrote and directed, I think, wrote Cloverfield, directed Cloverfield. I can't remember. He directed Cabin in the Woods. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And, he just has done a lot of really interesting things. He did a lot of writing on the Daredevil on Netflix. The Daredevil on the Daredevil series on Netflix. He's directed the episodes of The Good Place. Like, Drew Goddard's done a lot of really cool things. He's I think a very interesting talent in Hollywood, and I am always down to see what he is doing for sure. So that's a great recommendation. I wholeheartedly agree with that recommendation.
Nice.
My recommendation is a little bit different. It is also a film. The partner and I, we decided for her birthday, we were going to go to the movies, and we decided that we were going to go see the best movie released in December. We went and saw Little Women. And let me tell you, Josh, it is an absolutely delightful movie. It is so good. Another, obviously, if we want to talk about talents in Hollywood, Greta Gerwig, my goodness, is she an exceptional writer and director.
Yeah, she really is.
Her stuff is so good. And the acting in this movie is top notch. The casting was spectacular. Everyone just crushes their roles in this movie. The writing is amazing. The directing is top notch. This movie is an easy recommendation. I loved it. And I think it was funny because some people I think were giving me a little crap for going to this movie, being like, "Oh, you went and saw Little Women," and I'm going to go see Star Wars eventually. But I am very happy that this was the movie I went and saw. I had a delightful time with it. And if you enjoy dramas, especially if you enjoy period dramas that are well acted and well crafted, Little Women, super easy recommendation. Just an exceptionally put together movie. Josh, what do you say we wrap this show up?
Let's do it. Thanks for joining us, everyone. In addition to finding us on Twitter and Instagram at BoardWithVG, you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/BoardWithVG as well. So feel free to give us a 5-star rating over there, please and thank you. Also, if you want to communicate in the more long form or you're just not feeling social media, please feel free to send us an email at the lonely inbox of boardwithvg@gmail.com. We tag all our stuff with hashtag BoardWithVG, so please feel free to use that hashtag as well on all your social media. And whatever podcast service you're listening to us on, we encourage you to give us a stellar rating. That is, whether you're downloading us from the PSVG feed, the Dice Tower Network feed, or our very own standalone Board with Video Games feed. You can find me on Xbox Live and PlayStation Network way more often than on Google Stadia at Why So Serious. That's SIRRIUS. Kyle, where can people find you?
So you can find me on all of the usual places: Twitter, Instagram, PlayStation Network, Xbox Live, Board Game Geek, all at Psychocross, CYCOCROSS. Just be aware, very soon in the next 2 weeks probably, we are going to be doing our Meta Spring contest, speaking of game reviews. So be on the lookout for that. That'll be heading up right around the corner here. As always, though, if you do have suggestions for future topics, be sure to reach out to us on the social media, because we want to talk about what you want to hear about. And remember, everyone, whether it be board games or video games, never stop gaming.